columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. David, it's been a full week. We lost 180, almost 200 Iraqis in fighting just on one day this week. We had the words of Senator Reid getting reaction from the White House. We had the meeting between the president, the Democratic leaders this week. Are we any closer to seeing the two sides coming together on funding?
Not really. I think they will come together. They had a meeting where they said they were civil to each other, though Bush was a little angry at Reid for some of the things he said. And I think at the end of the day, we will have a political showdown. There will be maybe a veto of a Democratic bill, but then after that, there will be funding. I don't think Democrats want to be responsible for cutting off funding. And the bottom line is what's happening in Iraq. The bombing you mentioned, the nearly 200 dead, that's going to, at the end of the day, be determinative. Next week, David Petraeus, the general there, is coming here. He's going to meet with the Democrats, going to meet with a lot of the people in Washington, and he'll be able to report something back, yes or no. And I must say, the last week's events make it much more skeptical that the surge is working, but we'll see.
So, Mark, are we just going through the motions with these words? If you're heading to a deal, as David was saying?
No, I don't think we're going through the motions. I think that the mandatory date that the House included in its resolution will be removed, and they'll agree with the Senate, which has a date as a goal instead. But I think what they'll come back with after the veto that David has described, which I think if it passes both houses, the president will veto as promised, is they'll come back with benchmarks. And I think it's going to be tough for the president then to veto that. There's no date involved, and I think those benchmarks include things like the oil revenues and.
You mean because it's not binding?
It's not, but it does impose upon him an obligation to report to the Congress on the progress of those, and I think the benchmarks become tougher to reach for the Iraqi government, Judy, because 200 Shias get blown up this week, and it's the Shias who have to agree to the compromise in the government to give these concessions to the Sunnis, whom they see as their tormentors and their nemesis at this point. So I think the Maliki government has a very tough chore ahead of it to meet what I think are probably legitimate benchmarks, but maybe unreachable.
So harder for the president to veto, David, and you said the more deaths coming out of Iraq, the more pressure there is on whom?
Well, there's pressure on both sides. I mean, Harry Reid put his foot in it by saying he thought it was hopeless, and the Republicans pounced on that. But, you know, I think the fundamental fact is that it's going to be determined on the ground. And one thing I heard Rahm Emanuel, the Democrat from Illinois, say this week was we need to get some position where in August we have some objective source that everybody can trust saying the surge is working or not working. Because now you've really got two realities. A lot of Republicans saying it's working, Democrats saying it's not working. If we get to late August and no one can reach any agreement on how we're doing in Iraq, then we really will be in a mess. And they talked about putting together some sort of bipartisan commission to do that. A good idea, I think.
So we're talking 4 or 5 months from now.
I think what we'll have is a series of votes, Judy, and I think they'll probably become in the form of what's called a continuing resolution instead of to fund the war, probably for 60 days at a time, and so that there'll be a forced renewal, a forced reconsideration by the Congress and the administration, and quite honestly, the Democrats see that to their advantage, that Republicans continue to go on record, Republican House and Senate members, voting to support and endorse the president's policies in Iraq, which, as we know, have lost and continue to lose public support in the country.
The senator's comments that the war is lost, that help his cause, hurt his cause.
No, I mean it was not helpful to him as majority leader by any means, and it gave the Republicans a great opening to say he's letting the troops down. The way to say it is that the American troops fought bravely, effectively, with great skill, great courage. They won the military war. Now they're mired because of the failed leadership of the civilians in a civil war, which they can't win, and from which they want to be extracted and ought to be. I mean, that's I think, would have been a better way of phrasing it, and it is not helpful to his side.
Alberto Gonzales. David, where does he stand? He spent, what, more than 5 hours before the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday. It
was not a great Mensa moment for Alberto Gonzales. Byron York of National Review Online, who follows this for National Review, the conservative magazine, called it disastrous. I think that about sums it up. It was disheartening on many levels. The case he tried to make, which I made these decisions, but I didn't really do it with a lot of knowledge. That's a great Bush administration slogan. We make our decisions without any knowledge of our decisions. And I think it's disheartening for a lot of people because it reflects on the president. This guy is a perfectly nice guy, but clearly not up to the task of Attorney General. And a lot of people say, you know, this reflects very poorly on Bush. Why would he choose him?
But the president the White House piled on the statements praising him today. Dana
Right.
Perino at
Very
the White House
solitary White House at this point. The Republicans
she said
in the
he's doing
Senate.
a fantastic job.
Yeah, hell of a job, Alberto. No, there's no support there. There's really no support. You saw it of the Republicans in the Senate. Even the Republicans who tried to help him in that committee, he couldn't follow their lead because he really wasn't with it enough. There's no support there.
So where does this go? I mean,
he's all alone. I mean, it's rather a sad and solitary figure. I mean, President Bush is his only friend and supporter in this town. He's a man without a constituency, either in the Congress or really in the country. He was a George Bush protege. He plucked from a law firm and made his counsel in Texas as governor and continued along with him. And I think David's right. I think he's been elevated to a position that's beyond his capability. Being Attorney General is an enormously difficult job. And the speculation I heard today from Republicans was who's going to be next, and that maybe Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, by being his sole and most vocal defender on the Judiciary Committee yesterday, may have made the case for himself to get that job.
So maybe is Karl Rove vulnerable next? I mean, we had we interviewed the chairman, we interviewed Chairman Leahy and Senator Specter yesterday, and they both talked about wanting to get those emails.
Yeah, well, we'll see. You know, they've been going after Karl Rove, and